Welcome to Bronze Dad Plays, where today we're going to take a look at Wolcen, Lords of Mayhem, a Diablo-like action RPG. On this channel, we like to look at games through the lens of a dad, someone whose time and funds may be limited. I will also comment on how it feels to play as a generally low-skill player. So how does Wolcen stack up? Is it the right fit for a busy lifestyle? And can you make progress as a low-skill player? First, let's talk about gameplay. Wolcen, Lords of Mayhem is a Frankenstein's monster of action RPGs. But I mean that in the most positive way possible. If you're not familiar with Diablo-like games, they're a loot treadmill built around grinding through hordes of enemies. You kill the bad guys to get the items to increase the stats so you can kill the bigger bad guys. Simple, clean, addictive. There are many versions of the action RPG in the world. Want a cartoony, campy classic? Diablo 3 is where it's at. Want a deep, complex experience supported by one of the best dev teams in the industry? Path of Exile is calling your name. Maybe you long for the days of the hardcore, where things were a bit darker and meaner. Grimdark has your number. Take 20 Diablo clones, boil them down to the tastiest ingredients, and then let your toddler attempt to cook it to perfection. This is the recipe for Wolcen, Lords of Mayhem. Wolcen takes a typical format for stories in Diablo likes and decides to actually make it something interesting, adding a family dynamic that permeates the very environment you play in. Seriously, dad bod goals. This is a story I actually remember, with significant number of in-game cutscenes that aren't quite as cheesy as the usual fare, though it's hard to call them exceptional. The story carries through all three acts and does have some solid pivot points without relying on just, here's another big bad guy. The world of Wolcen is one where the art director had the ability to truly express themselves, but just forgot they were making a game. Beautiful and grotesque environments filled with same-colored enemies. Wondrous abilities whose logos are kind of hard to distinguish. I really did marvel at just how good everything looks when I was busy running between packs of enemies. Environments are reasonably varied and I rarely get lost. The world map gives you good insight as to where you're going, and doubling back was relatively rare compared to some other games. Gameplay itself is what you expect. A couple of skills on the hotbar, each with different damage calculations and special effects. You burn through hordes of enemies because you're the one true whatever. As their corpses pile up, you wait for the familiar sound of loot hitting the ground to indicate there's something worthwhile in the pile. Unfortunately in Wolcen, your two options for item labels are either what slot they go in or what the generic item type is. There's no hover tooltip or stat-changing arrows to help you decide what's trash and what's treasure. You will quickly learn what items are generally aligned with your build, though. The entire time you're slaying man and demon alike, Wolcen requires you to balance two resources. While Diablo 3 has this feature on a single class, Wolcen's classless structure has worked this into all builds. Willpower is what fills over time like mana, but is spent to produce rage. After a delay, rage empties back into willpower. Playing a hybrid build means that you spend both of these resources efficiently, and that's the best way to play. The game is what you expect from a Diablo-like, but with everything cranked up to 11. Unfortunately, all this time spent creating is wasted on the lack of polish. For the first week and a half after Wolcen's release, bats would occasionally choose not to be clicked. It was easy enough as a melee class to go up and knock some sense into them, but I literally started a fresh, new character because as a ranger, I lacked the ability to target my enemies. I'd rather change a diaper blowout than attempt to play a ranger in Wolcen again. Rerolling to a new character brought me some relief and also gave me a chance to play with some of Wolcen's strongest features, its progression system. Progression comes in many forms in an action RPG, usually summarized into items, passive skills, and active skills. In most areas, Wolcen does things very, very well. One semi-unique thing to Wolcen is the transmog system. Every item you unlock also unlocks its associated transmog. Dyes are dropped by enemies randomly, allowing you to recolor any item you're wearing. Because of these two systems, after enough play, you will unlock every possible look, and all on one character. Leveling up in Wolcen means receiving 10 points for your basic stats, plus a skill point for your passive skills. These basic stats have been reimagined so that any build is theoretically viable. Instead of having to restart your character for selecting your stat assignment poorly, Wolcen allows your main stat to feed your damage, no matter what your main stat is. In fact, all stats feed damage, they just also enhance something else, like crit, health, speed, or status ailments. This is a smart change, but even if you do mess up, it's a simple process to respec all of your points. Wolcen Lords of Mayhem takes the massive skill tree from Path of Exile, then decides it should actually be worth something. Gone are the 1,000 nodes, replaced with 3 spinning wheels of nodes. This allows its 20 plus archetypes to be mixed and matched to customize your character. The passive nodes on this tree are generally impactful, replacing one game's plus 10 to strength with something more akin to 50% more damage for damage over time, but you lose 15% on non-damage over time. A single passive skill in Wolcen is worth several from Path of Exile. You'll receive enough skill points in the main story to go into several archetypes, then receive even more in the endgame. This gives you a unique feeling character, though min-maxers will eventually have the best choices outlined. Active skills have their own systems to worry about as well. Because Wolcen is classless, all skills are available on all players, dropping randomly from enemies or purchased from the shop. This means no more re-rolling to try and find new skills. Just equip them. As you level, so do your skills, opening up modifiers to apply. These modifiers can be added damage, changing damage type, causing the skill to travel differently, etc. All of these modifiers can be swapped on the fly with no penalty at all. Fall behind in skill levels? Just go visit the vendor and pay an in-game resource to level them up. Want multiple builds on a skill? Duplicate the skill and change the modifiers for that version. Skills in Wolcen are generally fun, and the scaling can get quite insane. My primary build involved dumping all of my stat points into crit chance, equipping skills that kept 4 different ailments running at once, then using my passive skills to greatly enhance damage over time, allow damage over time to crit, and give me life leech from spell damage. Don't forget that I poisoned any enemies who came close to me, caused killed enemies to explode, and my damage scaled based on how long I stood still. Most fights consisted of me running into the middle of a pack, activating 2 circles of damage, and then watching everything die. Wolcen knows how to make things fun, when it works. As it turned out, upon launch, many of Wolcen's key skills simply didn't function. I'm not a strong player, but I was proud to say that I beat the entire game only dying once. And for those that have played the game, yes, this death was to the Act 1 boss. After patting myself on the back, I came to learn that the skill allowing damage over time to crit didn't work, and a separate skill that scaled my damage was scaling by 50% when it should have been 0.5%. Yeah, just a small, completely not noticeable difference. The developers have communicated that they will push patches weekly until everything is fixed. That's a great idea, and I hope it is supported. However, it could take some time to work through all the many, many issues plaguing Wolcen at the moment. Since we're talking about issues, let's talk about the endgame. Wolcen Lords of Mayhem is not a game without ideas. The 3-act story took me a couple weekends to complete, so I believe it can be completed quickly by nearly anyone. After completing the story, you start to play a city management game. You decide what the city should be building, then build something in that building, which nets you enhancements. Some are great, like an extra active skill space, or the ability to duplicate skills. Some are just, pay gold to generate gold instead of just going out and farming gold. I guess. These building missions don't progress themselves. You have to go out and play the endgame loot grinding loop known as expeditions to move things along. The entire endgame revolves around running dungeons, collecting loot, selling this loot for resources, then investing those resources to open up more endgame. It's built to take some time, which is nice. But as far as I was able to play, it was relatively easy. Maybe it's just more of the QA team not finding a missing decimal point, but I never really felt challenged. That is, until one instance. The Wolcen expeditions allow you to run a map, which you can customize with modifiers for the enemies. At the end, you can choose whether you want to continue or leave. If you continue, the game warns you that you will lose progress should you die. Of course, being that this game is relatively easy, you should continue. After the second map, you're allowed this choice once more, along with the opportunity to sell items you've acquired. This leads to the third and final map in the run, item rarities and quantities at its highest value, netting you gobs of cash. That is, assuming you can complete the map's objective and survive. And that is where our story ends. In the bottom right of this screen, you should be seeing a video in fast forward. That's me, running around the map trying to find enemies. I only found 5, searching every corner, walking along every wall, trying to move the progress bar forward. If I can't move the progress bar forward, that means that I can't face the boss. And if I can't face the boss, then I can't beat the level. If I can't beat the level, then I have to quit, and quitting means losing all progress. I've mentioned bugs a few times in this video, and for the most part, I ignored them. I mean, yes, I had to re-roll my character because bats were invincible, and sure, my only death was from a boss when Life Leech apparently wasn't working. And true that if your shields went above 100%, they reset back down to 0, meaning too much shield was actually no shield. But those were just inconvenient, right? I mean, it didn't really stop me from playing, but losing time, losing money, losing the little amount that I can invest into this game, that broke the camel's back. Remember that transmog system I mentioned earlier? The one where you collect items, you collect dies, and you can eventually unlock every look in the game? My progress was deleted. Little did I know, my character was affected by a bug that deleted everything in your stash, and therefore also your transmogs. I wasn't aware that my stash was deleted when I started up the game, so I went about my business and slayed some monsters. Well, as soon as I unlocked an item, that unlocked a new transmog, and therefore overwrote everything I had unlocked to that point. I got my stash goods back, but my transmogs are lost forever. Sure, over time I can unlock them all, and eventually the dies will drop again. It's no problem if you play for long enough, but that loss of progression and that unknown factor, it's just not acceptable. The clip of me running around, that was the last time I played Wolcen. I did start the game again. I wanted more capture. I wanted to play more of the Endgame. It's a fun game, but I couldn't do it. If you're a dad, which is the premise of this channel, losing time and money is a big red flag. So, here are my final thoughts. Wolcen is a beautiful game. It's designed to cover the weaknesses of the genre and borrow the best parts from many of its competitors. Wolcen's developers clearly poured their passion into the project. It's obvious they are fans of their game. Had Wolcen been given more time in the oven, the entire internet would be singing its praises. Instead, you have montages of Twitch streamers giving up after finding out that the elite bosses, the hardest challenge in the game, doesn't award anything. Given time to correct the sins of the release, the developers will create something truly special here. I look forward to playing again when the dust has settled and learn more about the endgame. But in its current state, with so much else on offer in the market, Wolcen, Lords of Mayhem, is a very mixed recommendation. Thanks for joining me here on Bronze Dad Plays. I hope to review Wolcen again in the future and come to a better conclusion. When I wasn't frustrated, I truly enjoyed my time here. But for now, if you like this content, please give us a like, share, and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow. Have an idea for our next video? Shout it out in the comments, and I'll be sure to respond. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya!